The screech of tires still echoed in my ears, a phantom pain vibrating through my bones. Metal crunched against metal, a horrifying symphony orchestrated by my own brother. I could see my daughter, Lily, standing frozen on the lawn, her face a mask of disbelief, as she watched her beloved M3 Pro become a mangled wreck. They stood there, my brother, Mark, and his spoiled son, snickering as if they had just won some twisted game. They thought they had broken me. They were wrong. If you would protect your daughter with your own life, subscribe now. My name is Isla, and until that moment, I believed in family. I believed in loyalty, in forgiveness, in all those saccharine sentiments Hallmark shoves down our throats every holiday season. Mark, my older brother, had always been difficult, arrogant, entitled, and perpetually convinced the world owed him something. He'd coasted through life on a trust fund and a silver spoon, leaving a trail of broken promises and shattered relationships in his wake. I, on the other hand, had clawed my way up from nothing, building a small but successful chain of consignment stores through sheer grit and determination. When my husband left, abandoning Lily and me with barely a backward glance, it was my business that kept us afloat. The M3 Pro was a gift to Lily, a symbol of her hard work and dedication. She'd saved every penny from her part-time job, scrimped and saved for years, just to finally buy her dream car. Mark always resented my success, my independence. He saw my daughter's car as an affront, a symbol of something he couldn't control, Lily's ambition and my strength as a mother. He constantly belittled Lily, criticizing her choices, her friends, her dreams. He favored his own son, a shiftless teenager with a penchant for trouble, showering him with expensive gifts and excusing his bad behavior with a dismissive, "Boys will be boys." The tension had been simmering for years, a slow, creeping poison corroding the bonds of our family. It all started when Mark demanded I allow his son Jake to drive Lily's car. "He needs some practice, Isla. It's just a car." I refused, explaining that Lily had worked incredibly hard for it, and that Jake's driving record was less than stellar. Mark exploded, accusing me of being selfish and unsupportive. He ranted about how I always favored Lily over his son, how I was turning her into a spoiled brat. He even had the audacity to suggest that Lily was somehow responsible for Jake's lack of motivation. He left that day in a fury, slamming the door so hard the pictures rattled on the walls. I tried to brush it off, to tell myself that it was just Mark being Mark, but a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I knew, deep down, that this was more than just a petty squabble. This was a declaration of war. The final straw came a week later at our mother's birthday celebration. It was supposed to be a joyous occasion, a chance for our family to come together and celebrate the woman who had always been the glue that held us together. But Mark, fueled by resentment and several glasses of expensive scotch, decided to use the opportunity to launch a full-scale attack. He started subtly, making snide remarks about Lily's career aspirations, questioning her intelligence, implying she wouldn't amount to anything without my help. I tried to ignore him, to steer the conversation in a different direction, but he was relentless, his voice growing louder, his words more venomous. Then he turned his attention to Lily's refusal to allow Jake to date her. He sneered about her high standards and implied that she thought she was too good for his son. Lily, who was normally very reserved, tried to stand up for herself, but Mark cut her off, shouting that she was disrespectful and needed to be taught a lesson in humility. My mother tried to intervene, begging Mark to stop, but he brushed her aside, his eyes blazing with anger. It was then that he uttered the words that would forever change everything. He looked directly at Lily and said, "You need discipline, and if your mother won't give it to you, I will." The air crackled with tension. A hush fell over the room. I felt a cold dread wash over me, a premonition of the chaos to come. Later that evening, after everyone had left, I found Lily crying in her room. She felt humiliated and betrayed. I tried to comfort her, to assure her that Mark's words were meaningless, but I could see the pain in her eyes. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would protect Lily at all costs. I would not allow Mark to hurt her again. I just didn't know how far he would go, how truly depraved he could be. The day he drove onto my property, hopped out of his car with Jake beside him, and deliberately rammed into Lily's parked car, was the day he crossed the line. It was the day he sealed his fate. He stood there, surveying the damage, a smug grin plastered across his face. "That'll teach her," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "Maybe now she'll learn to respect her elders." That was the day the plan was born. The person I trusted most was one of them. My own mother, blinded by some misguided sense of familial obligation, had been enabling Mark's behavior for years. She excused his actions, minimized his transgressions, and constantly pressured me to forgive him, to keep the peace. She saw him as her golden child, the one who could do no wrong, while I was always the disappointment, the one who never quite measured up.
The smug look on Mark's face was seared into my memory. That night, sleep evaded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lily's crushed car, Mark's triumphant smirk, and my mother's disappointed gaze. The injustice of it all gnawed at me, a relentless, insidious torment. I tossed and turned, replaying the events of the day, searching for a way to undo the damage, to rewind time and prevent this nightmare from unfolding. But there was no going back. The line had been crossed, and the chasm between us had widened into an unbridgeable abyss. The next morning, I tried to reason with Mark. I called him, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and desperation. "How could you do this, Mark? To Lily? To me? We're family." He was unrepentant, his voice cold and dismissive. He accused Lily of being ungrateful and entitled, claiming she deserved what she got. He even had the gall to suggest that I should be thanking him for teaching her a lesson. "She needs to learn that the world doesn't revolve around her, Isla. Maybe this will finally knock some sense into her." I slammed the phone down, my hands shaking with rage. Reasoning with him was impossible. He was so consumed by his own ego and resentment that he was incapable of seeing the damage he had caused. I decided to go to the police. Surely, I thought, they would see this for what it was, a deliberate act of vandalism fueled by malice and spite. I spent hours at the station, recounting the events of the day, showing them the pictures of Lily's destroyed car. But the officer I spoke with was unsympathetic. He said that because Mark was my brother, it was a family matter, and that they couldn't get involved unless there was evidence of a serious crime. "It's just property damage, Miss Rodriguez. Try to work it out with your brother. Maybe family counseling?" I left the station feeling defeated and alone. The system had failed me. The people who were supposed to protect me and my daughter had turned a blind eye, dismissing our pain as a petty squabble. I realized then that if I wanted justice, I would have to get it myself. I tried to explain the situation to my mother, hoping she would finally see Mark for who he truly was. I poured out my heart to her, telling her about the years of resentment, the constant belittling, the deliberate act of destruction that had shattered Lily's dreams. But she refused to listen. She defended Mark, making excuses for his behavior, minimizing his actions. "He didn't mean it, Isla. He was just upset. You know how he gets when he's had too much to drink." She accused me of exaggerating, of blowing things out of proportion. She even suggested that I was somehow responsible for Mark's behavior, that I had provoked him by being too independent and too successful. "You need to be more understanding, Isla. He's your brother. You only have one family." Her words were like a knife twisting in my heart. I had always longed for her approval, for her love and acceptance. But it was clear that she would always prioritize Mark, no matter how much he hurt me. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I felt trapped, suffocated by the weight of injustice and betrayal. I had tried to reason with Mark, to appeal to his sense of decency. I had tried to seek help from the authorities, to find solace in my mother's love. But all my attempts had failed. I was alone, with no one to turn to but myself. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders. I knew that I couldn't let Mark get away with this. I couldn't allow him to continue to terrorize me and my daughter. I had to find a way to fight back, to protect Lily from his poisonous influence. But how? I was just one person, against a man who had always been powerful, privileged, and protected. I began to experience moments of intense anxiety. Simple tasks like grocery shopping became monumental challenges. The image of Mark's sneering face would flash in my mind, and my heart would pound in my chest. I started having nightmares.
I would dream that Mark was chasing Lily, that he was trying to hurt her, and I was powerless to stop him. I would wake up in a cold sweat, gasping for air, my body trembling with fear. I lost my appetite. Food tasted like ash in my mouth. I forced myself to eat, knowing that I needed to stay strong for Lily, but it was a constant struggle. The stress of the situation began to affect my business. I found it difficult to concentrate, to make decisions. I made mistakes, lost clients, and watched as my profits dwindled. I started to fall behind on my bills, and I worried about losing everything I had worked so hard to achieve. I considered selling one of my stores, but I knew that would only be a temporary solution. The real problem was Mark, and until I found a way to deal with him, my life would continue to spiral out of control. I started researching legal options, searching for a way to hold Mark accountable for his actions. I consulted with several lawyers, but they all gave me the same discouraging advice. They said that it would be difficult to prove that Mark had deliberately damaged Lily's car, and even if I could, the penalties would be minimal. They suggested that I try to settle the matter out of court, but I knew that Mark would never agree to that. He was too arrogant, too convinced of his own superiority. The nights bled into weeks, each day a new battle against despair. I started keeping a journal, pouring out my thoughts and feelings onto the page. It was the only way I could make sense of the chaos that had engulfed my life. I wrote about my anger, my fear, my determination to protect Lily. I wrote about my memories of Mark, the good times and the bad. I wrote about my mother, my disappointment in her, my longing for her love. The journal became my confidant, my therapist, my only source of solace in a world that had turned against me. It was during one of these late-night writing sessions that I had an epiphany. I realized that I couldn't fight Mark on his terms. I couldn't win a legal battle or a physical confrontation. He was too powerful, too well-connected. But I could fight him in a different way. I could use his own arrogance against him. I could exploit his weaknesses, his flaws, his deep-seated insecurities. I could play him like a pawn in a game of chess. A plan began to form in my mind, a plan that was both audacious and dangerous. It was a plan that could either destroy me or set me free. But I knew that I had no other choice. I had to do something, anything, to protect Lily and reclaim my life. The first step was to gather information, to learn everything I could about Mark's life, his business dealings, his relationships. I needed to find his vulnerabilities, the secrets he was desperately trying to hide. And I knew exactly where to start. My marriage crumbled to dust. The constant stress, the sleepless nights, the gnawing anxiety had taken their toll. I became withdrawn, irritable, snapping at Lily over the smallest things. Our once close relationship strained under the weight of my unraveling. One evening, after a particularly brutal argument, Lily packed a bag and left. "I can't do this anymore, Mom," she said, her voice choked with tears. "I need some space. I'm going to stay with Aunt Carol for a while." The sound of the door slamming shut echoed through the empty house, a deafening reminder of my failure. I sank to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I had lost everything: my business, my daughter, my sanity. Mark had won. He had systematically dismantled my life, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. I was alone, broken, and utterly defeated. The darkness closed in, suffocating me with its cold, relentless embrace. I thought about giving up, about ending the pain, about simply disappearing. The thought was a seductive whisper, a promise of oblivion. But then I saw Lily's face in my mind's eye, her bright smile, her unwavering spirit, her fierce determination. I remembered the promise I had made to her, the promise to protect her at all costs. And I knew that I couldn't give up. I couldn't let Mark win. Not for Lily's sake, if not for my own. As I sat there on the floor, amidst the wreckage of my life, a flicker of defiance ignited within me. It was a small spark, barely visible in the overwhelming darkness, but it was enough to pull me back from the brink, enough to give me the strength to stand up, to wipe away the tears, and to start fighting back. I forced myself to get up, to shower, to dress. I looked in the mirror, and I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Her eyes were hollow, her face gaunt, her hair streaked with gray. But beneath the surface of despair, I saw a glimmer of something else, a steely resolve, a fierce determination. I knew that I had a long and difficult road ahead of me, but I was no longer afraid. I had nothing left to lose. I started small, focusing on rebuilding my business. I spent hours poring over financial statements, identifying areas where I could cut costs, streamline operations, and attract new customers. I reached out to old clients, apologizing for my recent neglect and offering them special deals to win back their business. I worked tirelessly, day and night, fueled by a potent cocktail of anger and desperation. Slowly but surely, things began to turn around. My profits increased, my client base expanded, and my confidence returned. I started taking better care of myself, exercising regularly, eating healthy, and getting enough sleep. I even started seeing a therapist who helped me to process my emotions and develop coping mechanisms for dealing with stress. It was a long and arduous process, but I was determined to heal, to reclaim my life, and to become the strong, independent woman I once was. As I rebuilt my life, I also continued to gather information about Mark. I hired a private investigator to look into his business dealings, his personal life, and his financial affairs. The investigator uncovered a web of deceit, corruption, and illegal activities. Mark had been embezzling money from his company, engaging in insider trading, and even involved in several shady real estate deals. He had also been having an affair with his secretary for years, a fact that his wife was blissfully unaware of. The more I learned about Mark, the more disgusted I became. He was a monster, a sociopath who cared about nothing but himself. I knew that I had to expose him, to bring him to justice for all the pain and suffering he had caused. The information I had gathered was damning, but it wasn't enough. I needed proof, irrefutable evidence that would stand up in court. I knew that Mark kept detailed records of his illegal activities on his computer, but I had no way of accessing it. He was extremely careful about protecting his privacy, and he never allowed anyone near his computer. But then I discovered something that changed everything. I learned that Mark had a gambling problem. He was addicted to online poker, and he spent hours every day playing for high stakes. He had lost a fortune over the years, and he was deeply in debt to some very dangerous people. This was my opportunity. This was the weakness I had been searching for. I decided to use Mark's gambling addiction against him. I created a fake online poker account, using a sophisticated algorithm to predict his moves and exploit his weaknesses. I started playing against him, slowly but surely winning his money. At first, he was dismissive, attributing his losses to bad luck. But as I continued to win, he became increasingly frustrated and desperate. He started betting larger and larger sums of money, trying to recoup his losses. But I was always one step ahead of him, anticipating his every move and exploiting his every mistake. Soon, Mark was in over his head. He had lost everything: his savings, his investments, even his company shares. He was desperate, panicked, and completely vulnerable. It was then that I made my move. I contacted Mark, revealing my true identity and offering him a deal. I told him that I would forgive his debts if he would confess to his crimes and provide me with the evidence I needed to expose him. He was hesitant at first, but he had no other choice. He knew that if he didn't cooperate, he would lose everything, including his freedom. The smug look on Mark's face was gone. He looked like a trapped animal, his eyes wide with fear and desperation. And in that moment, I knew that I had won. I had finally turned the tables on my tormentor. I had transformed from a victim into a victor. The plan was in motion, and there was no turning back. I played the part of the forgiving sister, the one who wanted to put the past behind us. I even agreed to meet Mark for lunch at a restaurant he chose, reeking of wealth and overpriced wine. He smirked, thinking he had won. He launched into a monologue about how stressed he was, how his business was struggling, how everyone was out to get him. I listened patiently, nodding occasionally, letting him dig his own grave. What he didn't know was that I had chosen that restaurant for a reason. It had security cameras everywhere, strategically placed to capture every angle. And I had a friend, a former forensic analyst, who was an expert at extracting footage. The entire conversation was recorded, his arrogant pronouncements, his subtle threats, all captured in high definition. I even managed to steer the conversation towards Lily, prompting him to make a few more incriminating remarks about her car, about how she needed to learn her place. It was all going according to plan. I smiled sweetly as he went on about his problems, all the while picturing the look on his face when the truth would finally surface. The next phase was more delicate. I needed access to Mark's financial records, the ones he thought were safely hidden away. I couldn't break into his office, that was too risky, but I knew he was careless with his email, often leaving his laptop unlocked. So I engineered a situation where I could, accidentally, bump into him at his golf club. I pretended to be interested in his business, asking him about his latest deals, feigning admiration for his success. As he puffed out his chest, basking in the attention, I subtly slipped a USB drive into his laptop bag while he wasn't looking.
It was a custom-built device designed to download all his emails, documents, and browsing history the moment he connected to the internet. Within hours, I had everything I needed. The files confirmed my suspicions: the embezzlement, the insider trading, the payoffs to corrupt officials. It was a treasure trove of evidence, enough to send him to prison for years. But I wasn't finished yet. I needed to protect myself, to make sure that Mark couldn't retaliate once I exposed him. I knew he was capable of anything, so I took steps to safeguard my own security. I installed a state-of-the-art security system in my home, complete with surveillance cameras, motion detectors, and reinforced doors. I also obtained a restraining order against Mark, preventing him from coming near me or Lily. And I hired a bodyguard, a discreet but highly trained professional who was always by my side. Some might see this as overkill, but I wasn't taking any chances. I knew that Mark would be furious when he realized what I had done, and I wanted to be prepared for anything. He had hurt my daughter. He would not come for me, ever. I also made sure to document everything, every threat, every act of harassment. I kept a detailed journal, recording every interaction with Mark and his associates. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. It was about protecting myself and my family from a dangerous and ruthless man. The game had started, and I would not back down. The final piece of the puzzle was Mark's mistress, his long-term affair partner. I knew that exposing his infidelity would not only humiliate him, but also create a rift between him and his wife, who controlled a significant portion of his company's assets. I decided to leak the information to a local gossip blog, anonymously submitting photos and emails that proved the affair. The story went viral within hours, sending shockwaves through Mark's social circle. His wife was devastated, his children were furious, and his reputation was in tatters. He tried to deny it, to spin the story in his favor, but the evidence was overwhelming. The mistress, suddenly realizing the full extent of Mark's deceit, turned against him, providing even more damaging information to the press. Everything was crumbling around him. I watched it all unfold from a safe distance, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. He had thought he was untouchable, that he could get away with anything, but he was wrong. He had underestimated me, and now he was about to pay the price. The stage was set. The trap was sprung. All that was left was to watch it play out. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Mark's carefully constructed world imploded. The board of directors launched an internal investigation. His company's stock plummeted, and his so-called friends deserted him like rats fleeing a sinking ship. He was a pariah, a disgrace, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones at country clubs and charity galas. But I knew that this was just the beginning. The real reckoning was yet to come. I needed to lure him into a trap, a situation where he would be completely exposed, with no escape. I decided to use his desperation against him. I sent him an anonymous message, hinting that I had more information about his illegal activities, information that could completely destroy him. I offered to meet him, alone, at a secluded location, promising to hand over the evidence in exchange for his silence. It was a risky move, but I knew that he would be too tempted to resist. He was a gambler at heart, always willing to take a chance, even when the odds were stacked against him. The location I chose was an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, a desolate place with a dark history. It was far from any prying eyes, a perfect setting for a final confrontation.
I arrived early, setting up surveillance cameras and recording devices, ensuring that every word and action would be captured. I wanted to have undeniable proof of his guilt, evidence that could be used in court if necessary. As I waited for him, I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. I had spent months planning this moment, meticulously crafting every detail, anticipating every possible scenario. I was ready for anything. He arrived precisely on time, his face pale, his eyes darting nervously around the warehouse. He looked like a cornered animal, desperate and dangerous. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice trembling. "What do you want?" I stepped out of the shadows, revealing myself. "Hello, Mark," I said, my voice cold and steady. "It's been a while." His eyes widened in disbelief, his jaw dropping open. "You?" he stammered. "But how?" I smiled, a cruel, unforgiving smile. "You underestimated me, Mark," I said. "You thought I was weak, that I would just roll over and accept my fate. But you were wrong. I'm stronger than you ever imagined." I could see the fear in his eyes, the realization that he had made a grave mistake. He tried to regain his composure, to bluster his way out of the situation, but it was too late. The trap had been sprung. "What do you want?" he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "I want the truth, Mark," I said. "I want you to confess to everything you've done. I want you to admit that you deliberately damaged Lily's car, that you embezzled money from your company, that you engaged in insider trading, that you had an affair with your secretary. I want you to take responsibility for your actions." He hesitated for a moment, weighing his options. He knew that if he confessed, his life would be over.
But he also knew that if he didn't, I would expose him anyway, and the consequences would be even worse. I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice shaking. "I haven't done anything wrong." I laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Don't lie to me, Mark," I said. "I have proof. I have documents, emails, recordings, everything I need to send you to prison for years. I suggest you start talking." I showed him the evidence, one piece at a time, each revelation driving him further into despair. He watched in horror as his carefully constructed lies crumbled around him. He finally broke, collapsing to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Okay, he cried. "I confess. I did it all. I'm sorry. Please, just don't turn me in." I leaned in close, my voice a low, menacing whisper. "Sorry isn't good enough, Mark," I said. "You've caused so much pain and suffering. You've destroyed lives. You need to pay for what you've done." I pulled out a contract, a legally binding agreement that I had prepared in advance. "Sign this," I said, "and I'll consider letting you off the hook." The contract detailed everything: his confession, his agreement to relinquish all his assets, his promise to leave the country and never return. It was a complete and utter surrender. He read it carefully, his eyes scanning every word, every clause. He knew that if he signed it, his life would be over. But he also knew that if he didn't, I would destroy him. He had no choice. With trembling hands, he signed the contract, sealing his fate. As soon as he signed, figures emerged from the shadows. It was the private investigator I had hired, along with 2 uniformed police officers. Mark looked up, his face a mask of terror. "What's going on?" he stammered. "You're under arrest," the investigator said, "for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy to commit bodily harm." The police officers cuffed him and led him away, his protests echoing through the empty warehouse. I watched them go, a sense of cold satisfaction washing over me. It was over. I had won. But as I turned to leave, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye, a glint of metal, a shadowy figure lurking in the darkness. And then, a gunshot. A searing pain ripped through my shoulder. I stumbled, the world tilting on its axis. The private investigator tackled me to the ground, shielding me from another shot. The warehouse erupted in chaos. Shouts, the metallic clang of weapons, the sickening thud of bodies hitting the concrete floor. I saw the shooter, a shadowy figure I vaguely recognized as one of Mark's thugs, trying to flee. But the investigator was faster, more skilled. A brief struggle, a sickening crunch, and the thug lay still, unmoving. The crimson slowly spreading across the grimy floor was a stark reminder of how close I had come to oblivion. The police secured the scene, their faces grim. Mark, still cuffed, watched the whole scene unfold, his face a twisted mask of fear and rage. He knew he was finished. Not only was he facing charges for his financial crimes, but now he was also implicated in attempted unliving. The weight of his actions, the sheer depravity of his choices, finally crashed down upon him. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The story exploded in the media, every detail dissected and analyzed. Mark's empire crumbled to dust. His company was seized, his assets frozen, his reputation irrevocably stained. His wife, humiliated and betrayed, filed for divorce, taking with her a significant chunk of his remaining wealth. His children disowned him, disgusted by his actions. He was utterly and completely alone. The trial was a spectacle. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence, meticulously gathered and flawlessly presented. Mark tried to deny everything, to paint himself as a victim of circumstance, but his lies were easily exposed. The jury saw through his charade. They found him guilty on all counts. The judge handed down a harsh sentence, ensuring that he would spend many years behind bars, reflecting on the consequences of his choices. I watched him being led away, his face ashen, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and despair. Lily and I started rebuilding our lives, slowly and carefully. The scars of the past would always be there, but we were determined not to let them define us. We moved to a new city, a place where we could start fresh, free from the shadow of Mark's influence. Lily excelled in school, her confidence growing with each passing day. She pursued her dreams with a newfound passion, knowing that she was capable of anything. I focused on my own healing, surrounding myself with supportive friends and family. I finally allowed myself to grieve, to process the pain and trauma I had endured. I learned to forgive myself for the mistakes I had made, for the times I had doubted my own strength. As for Mark, he faded into obscurity, a forgotten footnote in the annals of corporate greed and personal betrayal. Occasionally, I would see a brief mention of him in the news, a reminder of the wreckage he had left behind. But mostly he was just a ghost, a specter from a past I was determined to leave behind. Sitting on my porch swing, watching Lily laugh as she painted with her friends in the garden, a sense of profound peace settled over me. The air was filled with the sweet scent of flowers, the gentle hum of bees, the joyous sounds of children at play. It was a life I never thought possible, a life snatched from the jaws of despair. Had I gotten everything back? No. Had I lost pieces of myself along the way? Absolutely. But I had survived. We had survived. And that was all that mattered. They lost everything. I just smiled. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.